sitting, and all the time you're doing that to the screen, to your face on the screen.
Sorry, was that directed at me?
Nice.
Who are you talking to, Alex?
To you.
Me?
Yeah.
Ah.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. See, it's okay, isn't it? Losing the link and clicking back. So if everybody can mute again. And everybody find their mute button. Still searching, David? That's it, grand. Good, as they say in Ireland. Yes, so I was talking about starting the lesson with a chat. Those of you who do this will probably realize that's, or maybe you do it so that you can actually gauge what the pupil needs. What are their needs today? Because I think in this medium particularly, we need to do a lot more than chair and table. We can really do much more creative things along with chair and semi-supine, of course. But you know, we can shake it up. And so really hearing that, you know, are they in an active phase? Are they weepy? Do they need something very quiet and meditative? Do they need calming? Do they need, you know, to really move? And you can start to get a sense for what would help them best that lesson. And the other side of that is you can also ask them. I also ask them, is there anything they want to work with this lesson? Does anyone else do that? Yes. These are all things the old guard wouldn't have even considered, asking the pupil. Outrageous. So, yeah, good. So the general principles of online work is, I think we are getting back, as I say, to what Alexander was very first doing, where he was working on himself and really closely observing the pupil. Because when you work with hands off, there's no fudging. You really have to look. You have to observe, and not just sort of observe in a stressful way, but allow yourself to sort of drink in the pupil, if that makes sense, so that you get a sense of where they're at and what's needed. The way Alexander worked, Erica Whitaker gave us a session years ago on how he worked. He would stand back and just look and just let his eyes drink in what the information, and then let his hands go to where they're needed. And Frank Pierce Jones apparently asked AR when he was learning, where do I put my hands? You put them where they're needed. And a lot of the old guard said that. So now we can't at this point put hands, we're observing. And what we then have to do in this hands-off format is actually come conscious of what we want, of what's needed, and then find words to verbalize it, and then find words to verbalize it for the pupil, so that, or find the words to get them to explore it in a way that they come conscious of it, and then work out whether you get the pupil to work out what to do about it, or whether you start directing them. The words have to be very clear. And you really have to think, and you have to get your pupil thinking. And I think FM would be cheering, actually, if he saw us doing this now, because in the last years, he said it's all become about hands. They only want to know what to do with their hands. They're not thinking. So he was aware that somehow things had gone in the wrong direction. So this, I think, is a huge opportunity for us really to learn what FM himself was doing, or was doing before. In 1914, he learned how to put hands. And we can take it much further, because he never really learned, I think, how to articulate it in this way. He copped out, in a sense, and went to hands-on work. Is that a dreadful thing to say? So I think, you know, we're taking the step that didn't quite get bridged. And we also have to ask for a lot more feedback from the pupil. And again, the pupils will sort of demonstrate, oh yeah, it's here, and demonstrate with their bodies. No, put that into words. How precisely? Because again, we're encouraging them to bring something that's intrinsically a bit unconscious to consciousness. when you verbalize, you have to bring something conscious. And this is very, very valuable. And some people ask people to keep a diary. I do. Does anyone else do that? Yeah. Not all pupils want to, but I think for those who are into writing things down, it can be very valuable, because then they can record their questions and record their observations and note down their own findings and what worked, and in a sense make their own textbook. And we need to be creative to shake ourselves out of just standard table work, chair work, table work, chair work. Okay, any comments so far? Nope. Yes? Do I have a framework for how to use the diary? It varies, I think. Some people actually like to bring it with them and want to make notes together at the end of the lesson, particularly people with poor memories. This can be very, very important, to actually write down what they need to do. To do sounds a bit, but what they're working with, to write down the explorations we've made, the phrases we might have come up with, and so on. Other people want to go away and do that for themselves as a recall. And again, some people want to bring their diary and check it. Some people, I never see their diary. So it very much depends on the pupil. Does that, yeah. And some people just won't do it. Fair enough. So, yes. So resonating with the pupil. Now, who was my volunteer? Helene. Yes. Would you like to unmute yourself? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. So I'm going to put you on the spot, and I'm going to ask you to work on me. So I'm going to stand further back, and oh gosh, where's my specs? Excuse me 1 second. One leap I haven't made for online work is to remember always to bring my specs into the session when I stand back. So I'm going to stand back and put myself in a lovely pupil position. And Helene, could you talk me out a bit, I wonder, please?
Okay.
So,
can you hear me okay?
Sorry. Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you? Okay. So let me think. So Penelope, well, I wonder if you might think. Oh, I'm just thinking back to something I did with my husband today, so one of the things that, well, never mind that. So I'm wondering if you, this is very tricky, actually.
I've put you on the spot here, so just take your time.
Yeah.
Explore.
Okay.
There's no wrong answers, remember. There's no looking foolish. This is where we all start. Is, my God, what do I do now? Yeah.
So one of the things that I'm thinking about is how, like, what suggestion I might make to you in your thinking about that would take you up and, you know, like forward and up. Because I'm noticing that your pelvic girdle is sent forward, but I don't want to actually draw your attention to that. I'm thinking aloud here. I'm not kind of actually, because anything I might want to say to you to do might go terribly askew.
Just try some things and see what happens.
Sure. So I'm wondering, Penelope, if you might think about imagining, do you have a favorite animal? Like if you were an animal, what might that be? I know.
Panzer's tiger.
A tiger?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, good. So if you think about a tiger, when they're on the prowl,
Yeah.
what part of their body is actually leading them as they are kind of following their prey?
Oh, yes. Yes, my head. Okay.
Aha. Okay, cool. So what if you could actually be like,
Yeah, good. That's super. You've made a start there. Now, I'm just going to
Okay.
ask you a question, which is, as
Sure.
you're beginning to think, get me to think of the tiger, are you thinking of it with me?
Yeah, I was picturing the tiger.
Yeah.
But I wasn't, yeah, I was kind of picturing the tiger as I was speaking. Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. So what's, as you're doing that, what's happening in your body? Are you in any way picking up what's happening in my body, in your body, I wonder?
Huh. Well, let me think. Yeah, I was actually funnily, I was actually starting to lengthen and to kind of,
So let's carry on. But now I want you to resonate, allow yourself to attune to my body from your body, and find your own quiet and your own lengthening, and, as it were, direct yourself out of what's happening to me as you're talking. Does that make sense? So you're finding the directions you might use to bring yourself out of that, and being aware of it within your own body. Have another go, and we'll and see whether anything changes as we do that.
Okay. All right.
Again, allow your voice to join up with your body. That makes sense.
All right. So I think we were starting to actually get some movement in your system as you were thinking about how the tiger might walk through the jungle, and thinking about how, oh, actually, I don't know if you answered my question before about which part of, oh, you did. You said that the tiger's head would lead, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
come back to your body, because I felt you coming there. Did you feel that when you first?
Sorry, you felt.
I felt you there with me.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
okay.
So keep tuning into that, because when we go into thinking, we can lose that. Come back to
right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're actually going to now think about our whole body as being like a tiger, and thinking about walking. Which direction would you say that the tiger's head might be traveling as it's prowling through?
Forwards.
Forwards. Great. Yes. And is there any other direction that you might think, this might be a tricky question, but for example, yeah, okay, that's good. Good.
I think we've got there.
Yeah.
Did anyone else pick up the moment where she started actually making a real connection with me? Did anyone else feel that? Yes. Yes. Did you feel it, Helene?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yes.
Actually, well, to the extent that I did. I mean, I don't know that it was. Actually, I'm not going to. Yeah, I did sense it, and it was, I guess, the same kind of sense when I connect with a student that's in front of me,
Yes.
in a way.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm not sure what else to say at the moment about that. Yeah.
No, thank you. That was lovely. Thank you. Can everybody, whether you felt it or not, can you see where I'm coming from on this? That working in this way, it's just as crucial to be working on oneself, and as it is if you've got hands-on, because to start with, and I've done this demonstration now 4 times at each of the meetings, and it's interesting for me too, because I'm not usually on this side of it, as it were. And I can, when people are just, very often people have started by trying to get me to, swing forwards and back on my feet, and it's mechanical. And then it's interesting that when they actually tune in, that's when they start talking about my head and my back. It's been very interesting doing this exploration each time. So when you're doing online work, play with that one yourself. And sometimes I think it's helpful actually to go into the same shape as the pupil's in and actually, imitate it a bit and then talk yourself out of it, because that's a sort of an easy way to start. And particularly if you're doing a squat with them, say, that you do the squat yourself and see how would I direct through it, and direct through it yourself as you direct them. And then I think as one can refine the process, one can find that all from sitting down. But you are tuning in, you're picking up across the ether. The science, I think science has no explanation for this yet, but you really can pick up what's going on for people. Even sometimes when you can only see their head, you somehow know their hips are locked. And so on. So be open to that. And how does that sound? Would anyone like to comment on that before we go on? Tina, right. Yes, you could feel it. Lovely. Yeah. And yes, Alex, unmute yourself. Yeah.
These people, especially at the beginning, when they're not really tuned to their own body, what the impact of false sensory appreciation would have on this. So when they think that they're doing what I'm telling them, but I can see that they're doing completely different thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, that's down to teaching skill, isn't it? I think, that happens in a hands-on lesson as well. You ask them to do something and they do the wrong thing. And with time, you get experience in how to guide them out of that, how to get them to do less. I think a lot of it's getting them to do less, getting them to become aware of their surroundings. So I think this is where we need to play. And yes, I'll talk about more about that later. But I think, yeah, we're on a steep learning curve here. And I think it's about playing, isn't it? It's about exploring and seeing what works and what works for any given pupil. Because some pupils right from day one are completely intuitive, and other pupils 6 months in are still like working with a block of wood. And, so it's different for every pupil anyway. Does that answer your question? Or have I fudged around it? Yes. So
I would say you fudged a bit, but I think they're just hard to answer. And you're right; it comes with experience, probably.
Yes, I think the more one of the keys to this work initially is actually just to look confident, even if we haven't really a clue what we're doing, and just keep having a go in different ways. And if something isn't working, say, okay, let's just change to doing something else now, without telling them, oh my God, that didn't work. Just, let's try walking and just play around till you find something you can actually connect with them with. And that can take a while to find. Kathy, there's a raised hand.
So
Yeah.
can I ask?
Hang on, I think Kathy's first. Go on.
I just wanted to share that I experienced something very like this with my first practice teaching online, where we actually turned off the video feed to save the data. And I was working on the student in semi-supine, and I quickly lost my connection because I no longer had the visual feedback of myself, and I stopped being so aware that I was demonstrating or being observed as a teacher. And so I lost that resonance that actually had been there. So yeah, I've really seen that it feels a lot more mutual working online, even more so than with hands-on. You can't get away with anything. Yeah,
That's the
to
one.
be switched on the whole time.
Yeah. You really have to be present, don't you? You really do.
Absolutely.
And I have learnt to be present even when I'm not looking at them, but that's taken time to find that. Yeah. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
You'd like to share something?
That's me?
Yes. Did you?
Oh, right, yes. Alexander, in his books, he talks about almost the first thing in a lesson is he assesses people. He makes what he describes as a diagnosis of what people are doing. And then he says he actually often will share that with the person. For example, I can see as you're standing there at the moment that you're standing there with your legs locked, you're pushing your pelvis forward, you're leaning back with your upper back, etc.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, do you do anything like that? And then
absolutely. And in fact, I don't tell them, I get them to find it for themselves. That's what I do on a first lesson.
Yep.
And
okay.
I talk them through now, what did you do with your hands? Where did they go? Did they push? What happened to your elbows? What's happening to your hips? And it's starting to bring their awareness in. And if they can't feel it, and if I'm working online, I will actually hold my camera up and video them. And then play it back to them, even over the internet, so that and say, now what do you see, and talk them through it until. So I was in that little lesson with Helene. I skipped that step, and in a sense assumed some prior knowledge. But yes, I do a lot of anatomy play, and comparisons are crucial, aren't they? Just if you notice the head's back right now, tripping it forwards, try tipping it back again. So that they actually, because without a comparison, the nervous system doesn't wake up to what's happening. And very often you need 3 comparisons, not just forwards and up, but forwards, up and back and up, or side and the other side. So once there's 3 comparisons, it really helps wake the nervous system up. And I do a lot of that, actually. So any other comments at this point? And we'll talk more at the end as well. Okay, so there's 2 key things. One is to sense that connection, and the other is safety. But I think they go together. That when they really feel, when the pupil feels you there and sees you there, and the smile. I'm smiling at you a lot because it makes me feel like a safe person to you. But you have to learn how to do a natural smile, because if you're doing this, it doesn't work. So one again, there's a lot about bubbling up from below rather than just sort of imposing a smile on your face. But a natural smile really helps to make the pupil feel safe. So what work can you do online? Well, I've done chair work, table work, the floor work, hands on back of chair, hand-to-hand ball games, inhibition games, breathing work, lots of breathing work, speaking work, squatting, whispered R, walking, lunging, application work. They're in their own house, so they can go and fetch the Hoover, or they can fetch an instrument and work on their computer, and you can actually see them doing it. Anything, in other words. So I don't think there's anything you can't do in this medium. It's very versatile. But the point I would make is, because it is a very focused experience, and groups are great this way because they don't tend to break into chat. In groups, the minute you turn your back, they all just break up and chat and lose the focus. Whereas in this, they don't. And with my groups, I'm getting much more done online because I'm not losing them in chat all the time. So that's interesting. But I think something similar happens in one-to-one, that you actually have to stay focused. And the autistic boy I worked with, I've done one online lesson with him. I got far more focus out of him than I'd ever got before. So it's crucial that you don't overwhelm them with too many things. And I think 2 or 3 things in a session is enough. So, maybe some breathing work, some application work, some chair work, and 2 to 3 things is enough, and go into that in more detail so they know what they're taking home. And you know, I ask them at the end, now what have you learned? What do you want to take home? What do you want to work with? Helene, are you raising your hand? Do you want to?
Yes, I was just wondering, what size groups would you work with in a workshop setting? How many would you think is kind of that you can manage, and then, you know, what's the cutoff point that you think it would get too big to do online?
I actually don't know. I mean, my little local group, there's 5 of them, and certainly that's been very comfortable online. Working with, what have we got on the screen at the moment? 20 people, 19 people plus me. I mean, that's a very different experience for me that I haven't done until this week. But another teacher told me she'd done a group of 20. So I think it's also about what you're comfortable with. I think once, I'm just looking at the sizes of your pictures now and thinking if it went much smaller than this, I'd start feeling I really couldn't see. But at this point, I can still see you. So that's another aspect.
But this is a bit different because we're talking and it's not really,
yes.
You know, yeah. But anyway, okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think,
Thanks.
you know, maybe I'm reckoning maybe 12, because, you know, if you look at those 12 screens, they'd be roughly twice as big, and I think I could work with that. So it's down to you, but that would be my suggestion. I certainly wouldn't want to work with 100 this way.
No.
Yeah. Okay. How do you get the pupils to make the leap online? Well, what I did was I rang them all up, because I thought if I send out a group email, I'm never going to hear from any of them again. So I actually rang each of them individually, and if I couldn't get them, I asked them if they would ring me back without saying why, and said that I was going to be working online. And what I hear as the major concern was, is it going to feel like a lesson? Am I going to feel that I'm with you? And that's why the resonance thing, it's so important to sort of have that in the bag, because you can say, yes, it really can feel like a lesson. But then I invited them, just have a go. Let's have an adventure. Let's do one session like this and see what it feels like. And everybody so far has said yes, except for the massage therapists who've simply had to cancel their practice and they have no money, bless them. So that's been my strategy. And a teacher I worked who was on one of the groups yesterday said she had a new pupil who wanted to work, and they did a free 20-minute chat first, where they just talked through the technology and established that the pupil felt comfortable with the technology before even doing a first lesson. And I thought that was a very nice idea as well for somebody who was uncertain. Has anyone else made a different approach there? Asking? Nope, not yet. So I think the personal approach is the one that one has to use on this one to get people to, you know, to share their fears. Payment. One can use PayPal. Certainly if I work with people in another country, PayPal is the only way of doing it, or one of these international systems. But within Ireland, I can give them my bank details. They can go into their online banking and they can set me up as a payee. And then they can just pay each week or every few weeks or whatever. And that's a free service. And I'm presuming that most countries have something like that available within the country. Now, if you do that, when I first get people working online, they very often, they say, oh yes, I'll do that later today, but they don't. And 4 or 5 days goes by and I gently send a prompt and they say, oh, I forgot. Because of course they're so used to just handing over money at the end of the lesson. So yes, it often takes a couple of prompts to actually, and maybe it doesn't work for a while, and then we set it up. Other teachers have said, I think I'll do that with them before we start. So, and even get them to pay before the start of the lesson. And if you can manage that, I think that would be a very good thing. It's not something that's easy to do in Ireland. People are more lax about payment here, but it works. Now, the other thing about online payment is that you must get them to put their name and preferably the date of the lesson in where it says pays reference, the receiver's reference, because otherwise they'll write Alexander Technique. And if you've got 6 people who've taken lessons and they all write Alexander Technique, you've no idea who's paid and who hasn't. So they have to write their name there, and that's really important. So has anyone else got any comments on that one?
Yes, I often, even after doing a hands-on lesson, would just email people an invoice.
Yes.
Because I want to pay by credit card, and then I got to pay 2.5%. So I just send off an invoice, and if people have got an invoice, they normally pay it.
Yeah, that's a nice
sometimes sometimes people actually at the in my rooms, I'll actually go on the phone at that time and pay it too.
Yes.
So yeah, so people can pay there and then on their phone as well.
Yeah.
But I find an invoice always works, at least in Australia.
Right. Yes, it's got a more official tone to it, hasn't it? Nice idea.
Yeah.
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 Yes. Okay. The legal stuff. One teacher pointed out that if we're showing pictures out of an anatomy book and the session is being recorded, we could be breaking copyright. So please don't break copyright. There are these free websites. Wikipedia is a very good resource for free pictures, because if you click on the images in Wikipedia, they're usually available for sharing and they're usually copyright free. You have to check the small print, but Wikipedia is a good source. Sometimes things that look like they're free actually aren't in other websites I've found. And the other one is to draw drawings yourself. So that's one to be aware of. Another one is that to ask pupils or to specify to pupils that if there's a recording, they do not share it on and they do not post it online. I think we can assume that it's worth saying. Most of us can trust our pupils, but I think it's still worth saying in black and white and writing down maybe in your information sheet so it's clear. And the next one is, do check with your insurance company whether they have any extra provisions around working online. I rang my insurance company and they said, no, you're covered to work online. But what we want to know is that you are treating your, hello Glenn, hi. That you are, can you mute yourself, Glenn? Nice to see you.
Yes, I can. G'day, how you doing? So forgive my late joining. My alarm didn't happen.
Oh, bless. Yes, okay. I'll send a recording of it all afterwards so you can catch up. Yeah. So, yes, they wanted to know that I was going to be paying my pupils online the same attention that I paid them in the flesh, which was an interesting point. STAT is talking to their insurance, and their insurance is saying they want everybody to do a risk assessment of the pupil's room. Now, that's going to have to be done by asking the pupil to do a risk assessment. Thank you, Greg. Yes. So just to ask them to look around the room and check there are no loose cables they can trip over, there's nothing on the floor, the cat's been put out of the room, whatever, so that if they walk backwards, they don't trip and fall. And then log in your notes that you've asked for that risk assessment and they've done it. And that's, that's all one can do really. But I think STAT are going to produce better guidelines on that. I don't know whether or STAT or all your various different societies are looking at this one, but it might be just worth ringing your insurance company yourself if you haven't got guidelines from your society. Okay, so any questions on all that? Any comments? Karen, do you want to unmute?
I just have a question about payments.
Yes.
I got some sort of bank card that allows me to have kind of full bank accounts in Europe, or in euro, in pounds, in XYZ. and I'm just curious about how that is claimed for tax and where the money sits, if anybody else has, or if you've experience with that.
Talk to your accountant. Yeah, I can't really answer that. I mean, I think, yeah, I have euros and sterling, and you know, I just put the sterling stuff through as I just transfer it in as euros effectively into my end of year accounts. And if I do a workshop abroad, again, I just transfer it across and just list it all as earnings, you know, and turn it into euros so it's easier for the accountant. Does that answer?
Yeah, but then what about the country you've worked in? Well, I guess this is relevant when I was actually going to be traveling.
Right. I think it depends on limits, doesn't it? I mean, I think if I just flip to Germany, do a workshop and come back, the German government isn't going to be interested in it. If I'm there for 3 months teaching, I don't know whether that changes. Talk to your accountant. I wouldn't have a clue on that one.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so where we go from here is I'm actually going to run a 10-week course for teachers, because I have, as I say, I've written the book and I've got, you know, lots of explorations that actually work in a hands-off format. And a lot of teachers are feeling quite stumped because they've only worked hands-on with chair and table. So I'm offering this little course, and it's only going to be an hour a week. And I'm going to keep the price right down, €10 an hour, because none of us have got terribly much money at the moment. And we can explore together, and I can teach a few techniques each week, taking us through how do you get somebody to free their neck without being able to get hands-on if they've never, you know, heard of the concept even of freeing their neck before, and how do we actually get that to them across online? How do we teach them to be aware spatially? How do we teach them to use the eyes? How do we teach them to breathe? And the one, again, I'm particularly, well, I mean, all of this came through my work with Goldie. She got my back working in such a strong way. And again, there's ways one can really engage the muscles, not just getting people moving freely, but really teaching them how to engage the muscles, engage the core, so that they can work towards a strong back working online. So there's lots and lots of methods here, and I'm calling it an online toolkit, because that's what we need right now. This is a new adventure, and we need a toolkit. So, and we're going to start next week, Monday morning, 9 o'clock. So it's one of the slots that's up, which might suit Australians. So if anyone's interested in that, do you want to wave at me now if you might be interested? Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to sort that this weekend, and what I'll send you out at the end is a package of stuff. I'll send you the notes, I'll send you the video, I'll send you the little details of this course and the various time slots, and bung me an email back straight away, and we'll get this sorted hopefully by the end of today, or from your point of view tomorrow morning, because it's evening for you guys now. And you know, get going on Monday. Does anyone think straight off that they'd like Monday morning 9 o'clock? What's that at your end? If we've done 8 o'clock today and it was 7 o'clock at your end, it'll be 8 o'clock, won't it? Does anyone want to wave at me that they might immediately want to jump in on that one? Kathy, did you say yes? Helene? Yep. Okay. So Kathy and Helene. Good. And Tina, right. Tina.
And we've got daylight saving coming to an end soon in Australia, so I'm not quite sure what that makes the time.
Yes, and we're also going to start doing daylight saving, so I don't know what happens then.
It might just be worth checking on both sides. Put a